Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Today we are doing a journey through America's newsrooms with Sightline Media. They own publications like Military Times, Army Times, and Defense News, and they're here to speak with you all today.
We can do that. I'll start. I'm Mike Gruss. I'm the editor-in-chief of Sightline Media Group. I've been with Sightline about 5 years. I came in 2017 and started editing a publication called C4ISRnet that we run, and it focuses on emerging technology. And then about 2 years ago, right at the beginning of or a couple of months after the start of the pandemic, I started editing Defense News, and last July moved into my current job, and I'm excited for everyone to join, and looking forward to the conversation tonight. So I guess we can just kind of go around. Kyle, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. My name is Kyle Rempfer. I edit Army Times. I've been with Military Times, the company here, for about 5 years, going on 5 years now this summer. Started off as an intern, then I edited the Early Bird Brief, which is our morning newsletter, and then I became a senior reporter for Army Times, and then I became the editor.
Okay, Marjorie?
Hi, I'm Marjorie Censer, and I am the editor of Defense News. I am newer than Kyle and Mike. I joined in July of last year from Inside Defense, which is essentially a competitor to Defense News. But I've been doing defense-related journalism since 2007, and thank you for inviting me.
Great. And Davis?
Hi, I'm Davis Winkie. I'm the senior reporter for Army Times. Before this, I was an intern and reporting fellow here at Mill Times. I joined in about late 2020 and went full-time in May of last year. Before that, though, I had a non-traditional journalism background. I had some part-time work for CNN that I did while I was an intern and fellow at Mill Times. And relevant to a lot of y'all, I've got some experience in the Army Guard, and so I know what it's like for folks to be trying to convert different kinds of experiences and improve veteran representation in newsrooms.
Great. Well, thank you. And it doesn't look like we have an unwieldy group here tonight, so I think we can kind of hop in when there are questions, either in the chat or maybe even the hand raising function, if that's working. But I'll start with just a kind of a brief history of what Sightline's been doing, and kind of a short history of the brands, and then I think Kyle and Davis will talk a little bit about what kind of happens on a day-to-day basis at Military Times and kind of our more of our consumer-facing publications, and then Marjorie and I can chat a little bit about what we call our business-to-government brands and publications like Defense News and C4ISRnet, and kind of how we work there, and just talk a little bit about the journalism we do and what we're excited about, and then answer any questions you have. So I guess I'll kind of start from there. Like all good military PowerPoints, Davis suggested I start with history. So this is my first time doing this type of presentation on the history of the brands, but I think Army Times was founded in 1940, and Kyle, you can hop in here and correct me if I'm wrong. Most recently, we had a celebration in 2015 when Army Times turned 75, but it was formed by a former Stars and Stripes staffer, proved very popular. By 1947, a sister publication, Air Force Times, had started when the Air Force started. In 1951, Navy Times. I don't believe Marine Corps Times started until much later, until I think in the late 90s. Defense News was founded in 1986, And C4ISRNet started in the early 2000s. Many of the archives, I would say an overwhelming majority, but not every single page of what we've printed since then is online in some form. We have PDFs dating back to some of those first issues that are available through sites, I think, like Newsbank, and they've become very popular research tools. And I can't tell you the number of requests that our staff gets probably every week saying, from amateur historians and genealogists, and just saying like, hey, I understand my dad or my grandfather was mentioned in Army Times or Navy Times in the 50s as part of a promotions list. Is there any way to find that? And it's, in journalism, we use this phrase, a paper of record. And I think right now it's maybe a little bit of passe and out of date, but, for literally generations, that's what the military brands papers were. They were the paper of record for troops and veterans and their families. And, I think we still see that today. Marjorie and I were in a meeting earlier this week where there was a joke about an old ad that Military Times ran with Colin Powell testifying before Congress. And I think the quip was a senator asked what troops thought of a decision. And he said, if you want to know what troops think, then you should be reading Military Times. So I think that speaks well to our heritage. And, I know the work we're doing now, we try to continue that. In 1997, we were the company that was known as Army Times Publishing was sold to Connect, which is obviously a giant newspaper and television journalism behemoth, or was a behemoth. In 2016, they sold it to the group that owns it now. It's called Regent. It's a private equity firm based out of California, and they've owned it since then, and really have taken to the national security community, and are really like these brands and the journalism we produce. One of the things we've focused on more recently, we've worked on kind of thinking of Sightline as one newsroom. We have about roughly 40 full-time journalists in our virtual newsroom, I suppose, plus another at least a dozen to 2 dozen stringers and correspondents, depending on the week and depending on kind of the topics we're working on. Our full-time journalists some are focused on themes such as Karen Jowers, who many folks know. She focuses on military families. Some focus on specific beats. Some focus on specific services. So we really drill down, and even then, I think we are still. I hate to use the word experts, but I think we still have a really deep understanding. But there's so much to learn that I feel like we could have a staff twice our size and still be very, very busy. We have a video team of about 4 folks right now. We produce a weekly video show that is available on AFN. It's about 25 minutes long, and it kind of highlights some of the news, the national security news of the week. We have staff throughout the United States. We have correspondents in, I'm going to miss some here, but certainly in Germany, England, New Zealand, and Italy, as well as stringers in Israel, Turkey, Finland, Australia, South Korea, all over the world. To give kind of just a brief overview of our scale, we are probably somewhere around 14 million page views a month, which is very, very competitive with national outlets, the big national outlets that you would think about. Our print copies that come out monthly are distributed to more than 170,000 folks, and they're available at exchanges and are very popular. I think just a couple more real quick things. We do have a number of veterans who are on staff. You guys might want to help me out here if I miss any, but Rachel Nostrin, Kyle and Davis who are here, Daniel Wolfolk, Todd South. We have many folks who come from military families. Davis, is there someone I missed there? A couple folks.
I would have had to run down a really long list, but there's definitely a really strong nexus between folks with personal or family connections to the military who are in our newsroom, because we definitely value people who have that kind of expertise or personal familiarity that they can then apply to journalism skills that they've picked up, whether it's covering other things. And it's definitely worked really well. I like to think that our vets are a good part of our newsroom, or else I might need to be looking for a job.
No, absolutely. And so I would just say, one of the things I think that we look for in staffers are people who are curious, people who are the phrase we use a lot is not easily led. It's integral that folks are collaborative. We have a team that because folks are a little bit more spread out, because we're in a little bit of a virtual newsroom right now, that collaboration piece is extremely key. We want people who operate with integrity, that we talk about that with every new employee who starts, that the one time you talk to someone, that could be the one time they ever work with a journalist. So we want to make sure that we get the stories absolutely right, and we need folks who are self-starters. And then I just wanted to give a quick minute on some of this, like what kinds of stories we love, and I would just say simply that we want stories that make a difference, and I think that's part of what we've seen going back to the start of Army Times. But I think we want stories that lead to accountability, and you can see that in all sorts of ways. You can see it. We were joking this week, even with Mark Esper's new book, that there are nearly a dozen references to Military Times stories in there, which is far more than any other outlet. There are we've done stories in the last month about officers who've been reassigned in part because of our stories. I think we're commonly cited in, this is very wonky in DC insidery, but in Government Accountability Office reports and congressional research stories in classrooms. Nearly, I would say every week I have another military academy librarian writing me saying, hey, can we use this in this class? So I think that speaks really well to the type of work we do and what we aspire to do going forward. So I'll stop there, and Kyle and Davis, I'll kind of hand it over to you to talk a little bit about what the Military Times team does on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Yeah. So, Mike kind of hinted at it, but basically the Military Times structure is those 4 brands you see right there. I'm sorry, 5 brands. Essentially, the Military Times brand is more of our purple coverage. So that's usually done by, we have a congressional reporter named Leo Shane. We have a Pentagon bureau chief named Megan Myers, and they'll cover a lot of the policy guidance or congressional action, lawmakers, throwing a fit on Capitol Hill that has applicability to all the different services. And then under each of those brands there, for Air Force Times, Army Times, Navy Times, Marine Corps Times, there's a print edition. You've probably seen that at like the Post Exchange or the Base Exchange. And that comes out monthly. It's still a big part, even though we do, we've gone down in the amount that we focus on print here. It still takes up, probably about a quarter of our total time, because every month we have to really delve into that print issue. And so it's still a big part of our newsroom and like kind of a revenue driver. So we still have print, but I guess I would go out on a limb and say we're basically like a digital first newsroom, and daily news going up on the website is like our bread and butter at this point. some things to keep in mind under each of those brands. There's a senior reporter, and then for the brand, there's an editor. And so that's kind of the basic structure of the newsroom. We do have some other general assignment reporters that float around. And I think we're kind of reevaluating the exact structure of how we want, in the perfect mix of how we want reporters assigned to brands, and whether we want to take some of those general assignment reporters and double them up under the brands. But the bare bones of it is you got an editor and you got a senior reporter for each of those. And that senior reporter, in this case for Army Times, Davis, is like the lodestar for that brand. Some of the type of stories that we do at like Military Times across all of those different brands are like personnel issues, senior leader misconduct is always a favorite, crime, operations, force structure. So basically anything going on in the service. And, there's a lot of news going on. And so we have to be kind of judicious about where we put our effort into, but that's kind of the wide berth of what we cover. And then, throughout all of your times in the military, I'm sure that you're familiar with, a slew of scandals. And, one of the things that I think I'm pretty proud of at Military Times is name any scandal that happened during your time in the service for your respective service, and you could probably see Military Times having news scoops or significant coverage that contributed to it. Not contribute to the scandal, but covered the scandal. So for instance, like with Navy Times, you guys probably remember like the Fitzgerald collision if you were in the Navy. And, Jeff Zuzulowitz is one of our reporters for Navy, who was, I believe, the very first person to get the actual Navy's investigation into that. And I think that ProPublica had to cite him because of that. Similar, another Navy one was the Eddie Gallagher trial, which was pretty big national news. We had a great reporter who was, the first one on every single one of those documents. And I think it was a front page story at the New York Times, but they had to cite him again because, he was crushing it. On the Army Times beat right now, we're doing really good coverage thanks to Davis with the National Guard mobilization at the southern border and all the different issues that have come up with that, from pay to soldiers getting mobilized so rapidly that they've had total disruptions of their life, to even suicides. And so I guess that brings me to kind of our final point of like what we cover here. It's a lot of the stuff is like life or death, and that's one of the parts about Military Times that I guess I shouldn't say that I like, but there's a lot of gravity to the work, and a lot of you have a big responsibility. And we've talked about this a lot, about how we have to be very careful about how we approach certain stories, and we have to be very sensitive to a lot of subjects, but we got to cover them as well. And one of the things I like about Military Times is the fact that we do we're very aggressive in terms of like accountability journalism. We do a really good job with that. I think we punch far above our weight class. And, I've enjoyed working here. I'll let Davis say anything else he wants to add to that.
Yeah, probably the coolest thing about working on the Mill Times side of the brands is the way that we're structured really allows us to come together and bring a lot of firepower to bear when there's stories that affect multiple branches of the service. One example was there was a pretty serious string of deaths in tactical ground vehicle crashes, where the vehicles rolled over, soldiers and Marines died. And there was a really big Government Accountability Office report on that I was able to team up with our then senior reporter at Marine Corps Times, Phil Athey, and we were able to put together within 12 hours of this report dropping a 2,500 word story that really just delved into it, had family reactions, had already identified Army shortcomings in its response, Marine Corps shortcomings in its response. We've really got the kind of firepower here with the way we're structured to bring about reporting that really spotlights key issues that affect everybody from the generals at the top who are subscribed to our newsletter to the Joes and Janes at the bottom of the food chain who just see our covers when they walk into the PX. It's really amazing to be able to work like that. Let's see, and I'm trying to see the
Yeah, so there's a question from Carol in the chat. Are there some types of social justice or political impact stories that you encourage and others that you would not usually cover or commission?
To get after that a little bit from the reporter side, there was a lot. I've done a lot of coverage personally of the legal case of one officer who was punished for his participation in Black Lives Matter protests and for opinion articles that he then wrote about them. I did several articles about that. Regarding political impact stories, the thing about the military is you've got civilian control, and these civilians at the top of the military are all political appointees or elected officials. And it's really hard to separate, the day-to-day stuff from the political. So even a story like one I had yesterday about a Louisiana Guard officer being able to plea down a sexual assault charge to just an assault. It has political implications because it was one of the last cases to occur before this ongoing transition where military sexual assault and sexual harassment cases will no longer be handled by the chain of command. So there's all kinds of relevance to political decisions and those kinds of discussions, to where if you can tie it to something that impacts service members, it's pretty much fair game to bring into our coverage.
Yeah, I would just second what Davis said and just say there aren't necessarily stories that we encourage or discourage. I would just say, but that if there is a strong case of accountability journalism and we can show kind of what it means systemically, that's usually a piece we want to run.
And then I see Roger's question regarding our internship program. Mike, I know you and Marjorie have been doing a lot of work on that, if you wanted to chime in.
Sure. Can you? Sure. Marjorie, do you want to start there? Do you want me to?
Sure. I think the internship program, like a lot of things, is still, kind of a work in progress, and that we're trying to build it out. But we do have at least one intern that's going to be working with us this summer. It's going to be, I think, somewhat customized based on, who applies and what kind of openings we have. I think what I would say is, if you have somebody who's looking to transition, we plan to have the internship program fellowships available, but there are also jobs available if they have some journalism experience. I guess I would encourage them to just kind of check in on what we have. I guess maybe that doesn't answer the question though. If you want me to be more specific about like what kind of work we have them do.
The thought I had was that a lot of folks come from places where they have skills in the public affairs field, and I think that it is a transition in skills, if not a transition in philosophy, and I think that the transition of philosophy, I think, could take a lot from a journalist. Like a working journalist could very easily take someone who has skills under their wing and really get them to a place where they could be a working journalist. Yeah. For some, I think that might be a simple transition, and for others, maybe harder. But I was wondering if it was when I was very young, I took photojournalism internships for like $7 an hour, and it was awesome and all, but I ended up being pretty broke, and it was not a viable job that didn't leave me in a good place. So I think what I'm hoping for is that an internship has both a compelling sense of mentorship, but also a living wage. That for me is essential in terms of trying to create a viable place for a young adult to make a living. You know, that's important.
Roger, I'd second that, and I'd point to a couple of steps we're taking, and I share your sentiments there about having internships both be a living wage and be viable. You know, I'll tell you a couple of steps we've taken the last couple of years. One is we're not taking unpaid internships. We're not doing unpaid internships. There's lots of reasons for that, but I'll tell you generally, I think it's not a best practice right now. Our interns this year will be paid $20 an hour. Right now, the program is as much as 29 hours a week. We are working hard with our team and our legal and HR team to try and get that to a full 40 hours a week, or 37. Technically, our work week is 37 and a half hours, but so a full 37 and a half hours a week. But we're not. We don't have all the I's dotted and T's crossed there, but we're working toward that. I think I would agree with you that when we've had interns in the past who have succeeded, I think it's been in part because they're self-starters, but I think it's also because they have great mentors and folks who can coach them and tell them, hey, this is what's working and this isn't what's working, and that they've had that they've taken that coaching and really internalized it, and then approached it as a learning process, and had, I can tell you, the folks that we've worked with, if you look at what they're turning in week 1 or week 2 and look at what they're turning in week 10 or 11 or 12, I think in almost every case it's significantly better because they understand the jargon, they understand how to write cleaner, they understand the news value, and they're just getting more out of it. And they, even just in confidence, they understand, like, hey, I can call this public affairs person and they'll take my call, and I don't have to be nervous about it, and I don't have to be this isn't something that's going to make or break me, lead to a call to Mike or Kyle or Marjorie or one of my bosses. So I think we can do that. Like Marjorie mentioned, it's still a work in progress, and we're getting there. But I'm excited in the direction that we're headed, and I'm excited for the folks we've talked to about bringing in this year. We have one starting next Monday, and we expect that this will be on a rolling basis, kind of moving forward, and that will help us continue to have. For us to have good folks all year round, and that we can also, that folks can learn, throughout the year as well.
Would you advise journalism classes or communication classes, or would you say that estimating that looking at junior sailors who come out of DINFOS, would they probably meet your skill expectations, or do you have any way of knowing?
I think it's probably hard to tell. I will say we've done writing tests this year as part of our internship process, and I think that's been instructive. I wouldn't want to say one thing one thing works, one thing doesn't. We only take candidates from here, we don't take them from there. But I do think journalism classes can be helpful. I think having clips somewhere else. From another publication, having published work somewhere else is extremely instructive, and I think that can be a big benefit.
Then we do have another question for everybody, dealing with freelancers and stringers. How do you guys handle those?
Sure. Marjorie, do you want to start on the defense news side, kind of talk about stringers worldwide, and then we can talk about some domestically as well?
Sure. Defense news, our correspondents, our freelancers are basically non full-time salaried employees are mostly international. So we have a set of correspondents that we, work with on a very regular basis, primarily in Europe. And then we have freelancers around the country, and it's really, a per story basis that we work with these people. So they're pitching, and sometimes we see things and we're pitching to them. Mike and I have kind of embraced the approach of sort of the more the merrier. We're open to multiple people in the same country, and maybe in places where we don't necessarily know that there's a lot of news, but we're willing to try. So we do have a pretty broad group of people, some with more experience than others, but it's nice because we get stories that maybe we wouldn't think of. They're seeing things differently than us. And so I think it does add to our coverage. And there are opportunities there also for these reporters to partner with our journalists. When I was a competitor, and Defense News was able to do a lot with how COVID in Italy was affecting production, because there wasn't a reporter who was affiliated with Defense News in Italy. And so there is, opportunities for these reporters working abroad to kind of bolster our domestic coverage, not just to be sort of their own silos. So that's basically our approach. We don't really have anybody all of our US reporters are full-time salaried reporters.
And then I would say from the Mill Times perspective, we have some folks we use particularly for education and transition stories. We have a section on all of our sites that focuses on those topics, and those are that's an area where I think there's some good room for news feature writing, maybe, and so there's probably a half dozen or so folks we use for some of those stories. We have a custom content team that kind of works on longer white papers in cooperation with clients. So those are probably more like 2,500 word pieces, whereas our traditional journalism is, I would say, closer to the 600 to 800,000 word range. And those are folks who are probably pretty experienced in writing either about the military or about business and military acquisition. But I would say we're always open to pitches. I think we've been a little looser with the purse strings on freelance in the last year. The one area where I'm probably less interested in freelance for pay is in opinion journalism, in that I would say it's incredibly rare we would pay for an op-ed, but I think for the right stories and the right scoops, and particularly for enterprise pieces that maybe we couldn't get otherwise, that there's a real appetite for that.
Thank you.
No problem. So we can talk just for a couple minutes about Defense News and C4ISRnet. Marjorie, do you want to start, and then I'll kind of chip in on C4?
Sure. So like I said, I'm the editor of Defense News, and we consider ourselves part of the B2G group of Sightline, the business to government. And our approach is a little bit different than Military Times. Mike will talk a little bit about it, but the B2G group includes Defense News, C4ISRnet, and Federal Times. The way we work, I kind of hinted at the freelancers that we have abroad. We have 5 reporters here in DC, and the way we divide it up is we have a Pentagon reporter, a Congress reporter, and then an air warfare, a land warfare, and a naval warfare reporter. So that's kind of broadly the way we view the beats at Defense News. The focus is really sort of that intersection of government and industry, focused mostly on policy and procurement. There are some major things that drive our coverage. The National Defense Authorization Act is a major driver. The defense budget, which comes out annually and is a months-long process to get from proposal to actual, enacted budget, is a big driver. But there's a lot of opportunity also to for our reporters to define their own stories. We do a good amount of conference coverage as well. There's, shows all the time, AUSA and AFA and those kinds of things. And then there's other kinds of travel. An example that's come up again and again is our naval warfare reporter went to Ukraine in summer 2021 to cover kind of the US effort to support Ukraine's rebuilding of its Navy. And that ended up being really prescient work and was completely pitch, not sort of reactive coverage. That same reporter has traveled to shipyards to report on what's happening there. We have a lot of opportunities for our reporters to travel with senior leaders too. They may go with, the defense secretary. Our Pentagon reporter traveled with the defense secretary last year as he, did a tour abroad kind of in advance of the Russian invasion. So there's it's a very broad sort of turf we have, but it's exciting stuff. It's interesting stuff. I think Davis put as one topic, a typical newsroom day. And I always kind of laugh at that because there's no such thing as a typical newsroom day. That's the best thing about working in a newsroom. There are things that we have to cover. We monitor hearings and briefings, just like you probably imagine that we do. But, there's a lot of, trying to be creative, looking for source building is a major piece of this, looking for documents, kind of trying to buttonhole senior officials, senior military leaders, and follow up on something that a reporter is interested in or thinks might be a problem. There's obviously a lot of weapons program coverage, a lot of the big ticket programs that I'm sure you all are familiar with. Take up a lot of time, but I guess what I would stress is that it's a really sort of what I think of as a pretty pure beat reporting job. We want people to understand their beat, to find the sources that matter on their beat, and to break stories, to write interesting stories from there. I really think if you're a reporter, what you really want is a good beat job, and that's what we do.
Sorry, I would just add that, I think when you look at the defense budget each year, I think this year we're closing in on $800 billion, and then you throw in another $300 billion from the Veterans Affairs, and we're talking about $1.1 trillion, and that's an awful lot of money. And I think at its core, when journalism is done right, it's accountability. It's and what we're doing, particularly at Defense News and with C4 a lot, is accountability journalism on how that money is being spent, and why programs are succeeding or why they're not succeeding. And so to me, that's a very simple, very, very core tenet of journalism. The way I kind of I think sometimes we separate the two groups, or we have in the past. In Defense News and C4, their audience is a little bit different. When we think about our readers, those are generally folks who work in the defense industry, or they are government officials who are obviously want to follow defense acquisition programs. The phrase I use a lot is business intelligence, and I think that intelligence can look lots of different ways. It could be, hey, here's the person who's running this office. So if you're curious about wanting to submit a bid for this program, like you should know who this person is. You should know kind of the language and the nomenclatures that they use, that even some, one I kind of point to all the time is that, a couple of years ago, it was very popular to refer to things as eye-watering. So if you're going to describe, your offerings, maybe you want to use the right terms. And it could be, another favorite thing is like, hey, there used to be a Boeing executive, very high-ranking Boeing executive who exclusively drank Tab, the soda from the 80s. And if you were going to be doing business with Boeing space program, you knew like you had to have Tab in your office, because that's what he wanted, and that's what made him happy. And it's like, so I think there's big things and there's little things, and we can we can kind of tackle all of those if we're doing business intelligence, right? For C4, it's a lot of the emerging technology, cybersecurity, and cyber operations, the network, this whole idea of connecting any sensor to any shooter that's referred to as JADC2, a terrible military acronym. There's unmanned platforms. So I think there's it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of good topics. And for us, I think the challenge is just trying to tell them in compelling, tell these stories in compelling ways, and to make sure our readers feel that that what we're providing is indispensable. So I'll kind of stop there and see if there's any questions or anything that anyone else wants to add, Kyle or Davis or Marjorie.
Yeah, I can chime in with something. The fact that we have both a kind of military newsroom and this B2G newsroom, where you've got a bunch of people who are in sync with like operations, personnel, that kind of stuff, you know, like what matters to soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. And you've also got these people on the other side that have this deep expertise on the budget and kind of the really big picture things. Sometimes I'm able to get together with my colleague Jen Judson, who's our land warfare reporter and is just a shining star, president of the National Press Club, super mom, absolutely crushes budget coverage every year. The fact that we've got both of these newsrooms put together just makes for some really amazing coverage possibilities sometimes, and allows us to produce work at scale that just isn't possible from any other newsroom in the national security space.
Yeah, I guess I'll add one thing too. Just you know, people were asking a little bit earlier about how to kind of break into the career field, or you know, how to juggle the fact that, you know, journalism isn't always the best paying of your post-military options. It's a tough career field. I think Mike is talking about a lot of the things that the company has been doing to you know, ease that burden for especially early, you know, first career kind of journalists that are trying to get into it. But at the end of the day, and I probably would hesitate to say this to like college students, but to military folks, I think you guys are a little bit more, you know, hardened. Just, you know, be aware, you know, journalism is a tough career field. It's, you know, you do have to, you know, you don't always have the same safety net, you know, as far as career development and stuff that you may have had in the military. And so you got to go out on a limb, and you have to be a self-starter, and you have to be, you know, aggressive about it. And, you know, to what extent we can like help and make sure that, you know, journalists shouldn't be doing free internships, for instance. You know, I definitely think that's on the companies, and they need to, you know, close those up. But at the end of the day, journalism is a tough career field to break into, and everyone attempting it should be, you know, not so starry-eyed about it and understand that. That said, it is rewarding. And, you know, I would say, you know, to echo what Marjorie had said, that being a beat reporter is where you want to be. You know, if you're looking at your first step in journalism, looking at the trade publications, looking at Military Times, that is a great place to start, because it makes you an expert in that beat. And you see a lot of people that started out at Military Times, started out at Inside Defense, started out at all these publications that go, you know, great places internally in those publications and elsewhere. So it's a great place to be if you want to jump into it.
And then Devin, I think we had one more slide about a few more related publications.
There we go.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention here. So Sightline also owns Federal Times. That's a publication that's geared pretty exclusively for the federal workforce. That is an online only publication. We also have, you know, we don't have kind of like the family roles all nailed down, right? But I think we kind of refer to all the Sightline publications as sister publications. So one step removed, I guess, kind of be our cousins here. We have the Sunset magazine, which is in California. It's a very popular West Coast lifestyle magazine. And they're also owned by Region and share some of the same backroom functions that we do here at Sightline, and also HistoryNet, which just owns a whole group of specific history themed magazines and websites that are really pretty top notch and get experts who go very, very deep into the fields. I know particularly in Civil War, Vietnam War, just some great, really insightful writing and reporting there. So those are also part of our umbrella, and both also do very good work. So I think that's it, but if there's, I think all of us are happy to answer any other questions if there are any, or talk about any topics we haven't brought up yet.
If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask. We will be having another event with Military Times in early June. That will be more geared toward hiring. So feel free to ask here, or you can save them for then. Okay, Terry has asked for contact info.
No problem. We can put that, we can pass that along.
Perfect.
So
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Anything at all that they'd like to ask about publications, the environment, anything like that? Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions, oh wait, Roger?
Just unmute here. Am I muted? Hang on, stand by.
You are not, you're good.
All right, here we go. All right. You mentioned that some of your people were virtual, and there was a virtual environment, but would you say that most of you are all like centrally located in a specific location, or do you work from home, or do you work from hubs and
Sure.
offices, or what?
Sure, we have things have changed a lot during the pandemic. We have a WeWork in Boston, in the Arlington area. I would say folks are welcome to work there, and I think some come in more often than others. Most, I would say, the overwhelming majority of folks are working from home right now. And I would say the majority are in the greater DC area. Davis is in the Atlanta area. Jeff Zulowitz, our Navy reporter, is in Washington State. We have some other folks throughout the country, but for right now, we're kind of working on. We're still working in that kind of work from home environment. I think probably as things loosen up, knock on wood, maybe later this year, that folks will be coming in more regularly, but we don't expect to be like in a full-time, again, 40-hour a week newsroom where we're all in the same place all at the same time.
Did you see any drop off in your, whether it be productivity or workplace environment as you were transitioning to work from home? I mean, did that affect you personally? Were you more effective with people around you or less?
It's certainly a different leadership style, and I think there's pros and cons. I think undeniably the productivity went up, and in kind of every measure. If you're going to look at the number of stories we did, the page views, the amount of time people were spending on site, I think if you look at that from the beginning of the pandemic to where we were in 2018 or 2019. I think literally by every standard, we were doing better. I'll let others speak to the work environment. I mean, I think there are certainly things that are lost. I mean, I say it half jokingly, but it's nice to be able to bump, roll your chair back and bump into someone and say, hey, what do you think about this lead? Or overhear someone on the phone and say, who were you talking to like that? I haven't heard someone talk to a public affairs official like that before. Or how did you get this document? I can never figure out how to read. I don't know the difference between a program activity and a contract line item. So I think some of those things are lost. And what I would just say broadly is, I think the folks who have asked the most questions and stopped, have not suffered in silence and have been as collaborative as possible have probably been those folks the last couple of years who have succeeded the most. And I think those who've maybe struggled or maybe not succeeded as much are those that have where it's maybe been a little more insular. But I'll let Davis and Kyle and Marjorie talk a little bit about the work environment and how that's, if it's changed or for the better or worse.
Yeah, so Mike has the interesting challenge of trying to lead people like me who I have no idea what a physical newsroom is. I've never seen one before in my life. I didn't go to J school. I learned how to become a reporter in my parents' basement over Slack and Zoom and Pointer News U classes and stuff like that. But at the same time, we've got this kind of supportive, collaborative digital environment where I wouldn't say that this is necessarily the most, what's the best way to put this? The most poppin' Slack culture necessarily, but there, we've each got like our own little message huddles where I think at least 2 or 3 times a day, I bother Kyle and make him listen to some really dumb ideas I have, in addition to, the usual humdrum of, hey, that story's ready, or more often than not, hey, I need another day on that story. But even without the physical proximity that a newsroom would give us, we've really been able to make it work. And the fact that we've had some decentralization and have, me down in Atlanta, for example, PAOs across the South are afraid because I'm 2 hours away from showing up at your doorstep at Fort Jackson, Fort Benning, Fort Rucker. I can make it down to Stewart, up to Campbell, out to Bragg if I really want to drive and look at nothing. There's some certain advantages to the way that we've embraced this kind of hybrid approach in more recent years.
Yeah, I would just say, I think that there's definitely an energy to the newsroom that I miss. It's kind of a classic vibe. But at the same time, not having to do the commute, feeling like you're a little bit more flexible on your hours. I think the benefits outweigh the downsides for me personally.
I would just add, I think also, we're all adjusting, not just Sightline and everybody, right? We're trying to figure out what this looks like. And, there are times where we have decided that being in person matters. So on budget day, we bring everybody together into the office and we got donuts and lunch. And I was really pleased that there were some story ideas that emerged from people just talking to each other, which is kind of classic newsroom event, but talking to each other in person, walking down a hall, that kind of thing. So there are times we do that. We're trying to do happy hours. I think the hybrid or virtual environment works best when people know each other and have relationships, and those can be built multiple ways, through hanging out, social stuff, through working together, through Slack. But we're just trying to give people opportunities to know each other, trust each other, so that they can collaborate and work together. And I agree with Kyle. There's obvious advantages, and I think I've enjoyed those advantages. I think the what's lost is a little more. It's kind of subjective. It's a little hard to get your arms around. I think it's something, but hopefully some of the solutions we're finding, mitigate how much we lose by not being in a newsroom environment.
And then we do have one other question from Carol. She has asked if there are specific guidelines for submissions from freelancers, and are those guidelines available on each publication's website?
That's a good question. I thought they were, but I know we've worked hard on this. If Carol, if you shoot me an email, I will get you those guidelines. I know we have a one sheet that we've drawn up specifically for some of these. Thank you. And I can make sure to send that out.
Awesome. Okay, well, this is a last call for questions. And if nobody else has any, I think we are good to go. Hi, Russell. Thanks for
Thank
stopping
you.
by.
Thanks everyone for hosting us.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this event. We really appreciate it. We will see you guys again in early June.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.